What if the same artisans, who created Venice's legendary splendor, were systematically destroyed by the very state they served? What if behind every gilded altar and gleaming coin lay not just wealth, but a calculated campaign of elimination, so thorough that for centuries, no one even knew to ask what happened? At dawn, Venice emerges from the mist like a ghost of empire. Water laps against marble steps, worn smooth by centuries of passage. Palaces rise impossibly from the lagoon, their gilded surfaces catching the first light. This is how we remember Venice. Eternal, magnificent, untouchable. But what if the city's greatest achievement was not what it built, but what it buried? This is the story of how Venice weaponized silence. For generations, historians have celebrated Venice as a commercial miracle, a republic that transformed shallow marshland into the beating heart of Mediterranean finance. We admire its innovation, its resilience, its artistry, yet, tucked within the same archives that document this glory, another narrative whispers from the margins. A story of masters who vanished, techniques that disappeared overnight, and questions that were never meant to be asked. The puzzle begins with gold itself. Venice didn't merely possess gold. It manufactured gold and authority on an industrial scale. Every surface that mattered, religious icons, military standards, architectural monuments stayed coinage, blazed with metallic brilliance. This wasn't aesthetic whimsy. In a world where legitimacy was performed as much as enforced, visual wealth translated directly into political power. To appear golden was to be powerful. Creating this illusion required a specific technology, mercury amalgamation. Through this process, craftsmen could bond gold onto base metals with unprecedented efficiency. Mercury and gold were combined into a paste, applied to bronze or copper surfaces, then heated as mercury vapor escaped. Pure gold remained, fused permanently to the underlying metal. The technique was revolutionary, rapid, and repeatable. It was also extraordinarily hazardous. Mercury workers existed in a specialized underworld of Venetian industry, exposed constantly to toxic fumes. They suffered tremors, cognitive decline, and premature death. The work demanded years of apprenticeship to master the precise temperatures, material ratios, and timing required. Knowledge passed orally from master to apprentice, deliberately kept from written records. To document the process was to lose competitive advantage. Venice managed this dangerous expertise through its guild system. Far from ceremonial organizations, guilds functioned as state enforcement mechanisms. They controlled training, monitored materials, and bound practitioners to secrecy through legal oaths. For mercury specialists, these restrictions were absolute. Leaving Venice with technical knowledge could mean execution. For a time, this arrangement served everyone. The state gained reliable access to critical technology. Masters enjoyed protected status and steady work. Gold production scaled efficiently across minting, architecture, and military applications. Venice's golden image grew more convincing with each gilded dome. Then something shifted, beginning in the late 1400s. Venetian legal codes began referencing mercury with new urgency. Early regulations appear sensible quantity limits, licensing requirements, contamination penalties, standard public health measures for dangerous materials. But the language evolves rapidly. Within decades, simple regulation transforms into something darker. Penalties escalate beyond all proportion. Fines become prison terms become executions. Crucially, these punishments target not careless apprentices, but master craftsmen, the most experienced practitioners. those least likely to cause accidents through incompetence. Simultaneously, guild documentation thins dramatically. Membership rolls end abruptly. Apprenticeship chains break. Technical manuals mentioned in earlier inventories disappear from later catalogs. Entire professions seem to evaporate within a single generation, leaving no retirement records, no transfer of workshops, no gradual decline, just absence. The official explanation insists this was prudent governance. Mercury posed unacceptable risks. The state acted responsibly to protect public welfare. Yet this narrative crumbles under examination. If safety drove policy, why eliminate the most qualified experts? Rather than leverage their knowledge to improve practices, why not establish centralized, monitored workshops with enhanced ventilation? Why resort to execution, the most destabilizing response imaginable, instead of regulation? And most damningly, why does gold production accelerate precisely as mercury masters disappear? Venice's most ambitious gilding projects date to this exact period. Architectural programs expand. Coin production increases to support growing trade networks. The visual language of authority intensifies rather than diminish. The technology clearly survives. The practitioners do not. Someone took their place. The question is, who and under what conditions? Here the historical record becomes deliberately opaque. Trials involving mercury specialists were conducted by special councils, rather than public courts. Proceedings were sealed, witnesses went unnamed. Verdicts appear as single-line summaries, without supporting charges. Some executions are recorded without any accusation whatsoever. This absence is revealing. Venice documented everything compulsively. Tax records, ship manifests, births, deaths, commercial contracts. Systematic lack of detail surrounding mercury masters represents policy, not negligence. These were not forgotten cases. They were classified ones. Even the manner of death suggests intentional erasure. Public executions served deterrent functions. They reinforced law through spectacle. But mercury masters often died quietly, without crowds or announcement. Bodies disappeared into administrative machinery. If the goal was warning others, silence makes no sense. If the goal was erasing knowledge, silence is perfect. What emerges from these fragments is a chilling pattern of deliberate suppression. Consider the logic of replacement. Amalgam gilding is technically demanding, requiring precise control and years of training. If hundreds of specialists were removed within decades, production should have collapsed or at minimum shown disruption. Instead, output remains stable. Projects proceed on schedule. Quality never falters. This continuity without transmission points to prior preparation. Either the state had already absorbed critical knowledge before eliminating its holders, or it determined that concentrated expertise itself posed the fundamental threat. Both scenarios indicate planning, rather than crisis response. The hypothesis that resolves every contradiction is this: Venice systematically dismantled an independent class of knowledge bearers, whose mastery represented technological and economic power, incompatible with centralized control. Amalgam masters occupied a unique structural position. They didn't simply apply gold. They controlled a transformative process that compressed extraordinary output for minimal input. Their work created the visual language of legitimacy with efficiency that should have been impossible given medieval labor constraints. This capability was destabilizing. When productivity accelerates faster than institutional oversight can absorb, power shifts unpredictably. Experts gain leverage. Dependencies form outside official channels. Knowledge becomes negotiable currency. Venice recognized this vulnerability and responded with characteristic ruthlessness. First, restrict materials through licensing and surveillance. This draws practitioners into visibility. Second, criminalize deviation through deliberately vague statutes, granting magistrates unlimited discretion. Third, eliminate irreducible elements, those whose expertise cannot be fragmented or supervised. Execution becomes not punishment, but removal. The result was absorption rather than destruction. Mercury handling didn't vanish. It moved inward toward state-controlled facilities, where access was restricted and knowledge compartmentalized. Instead of masters understanding complete processes, you got laborers understanding fragments. One heats, one applies, one transports, none comprehends the whole. This model mirrored Venice's arsenal, where shipbuilding was divided into tasks so precise and segmented that no individual understood entire vessels. Efficiency increased, secrecy deepened. State dependency became absolute. By the time this transformation completed, no one remembered why it had been necessary. Gold simply appeared where the state required it. The system functioned without visible experts, which reinforced the illusion that expertise had never been concentrated in individuals. This is how erasure succeeds, not by denying the past, but by rendering it irrelevant. Contemporary sources hint at understanding. Fragmentary letters reference dangerous arts. Technical treatises omit critical steps without explanation, as if assuming knowledge no longer publicly acknowledged. Even myths preserve emotional truth where records fail. Stories of poisoned craftsmen, masters driven mad, secret techniques lost to time. These tales remember that something powerful existed and was removed. What makes Venice's action particularly instructive is its success. The model worked. The state stabilized, power centralized, and the method absorbed what can be controlled. Eliminate what cannot erase. The memory of both became replicable across contexts. We see echoes throughout subsequent history. Spain militarized mercury knowledge for New World silver extraction. France absorbed artisans into royal manufactories. Across Europe, sensitive processes moved behind walls as efficiency increased and transparency decreased. Venice's innovation was perfecting erasure as administrative procedure. The implications extend beyond medieval history. When we admire Venice's resilience, we rarely ask what was sacrificed to achieve it. The gold that still gleams on its domes memorializes not just triumph, but skills deemed too powerful to remain free. This reframes how we understand historical progress. Advancement occurs not only through accumulation, but through subtraction, through decisions about which knowledge may survive and which must be forgotten for systems to endure. How many other times has this happened? How many technologies were abandoned, not because they failed, but because they worked too well outside centralized control? How much apparent stagnation masks deliberate forgetting? Venice teaches us that erasure doesn't require catastrophe. It requires administration law, silence, and time. Once practitioners disappear, once documents are sealed, once systems adapt, memory fades. Within generations, absence feels normal. The canals still reflect the sky. The buildings endure. Tourists marvel at light on water, unaware that beneath the surface lies history, shaped as much by what was removed as what was built. Venice's deadly secret is not that it killed skilled artisans. It's that it succeeded in erasing. Why? And that success matters, because it reveals how power truly operates. Not through spectacle alone, but through systems that decide which knowledge may circulate, and which must be buried so deeply that future generations forget it ever existed. The most effective control is memory management. Once memory is gone, even truth becomes optional. This is only one thread. History quietly cut loose, but every system leaves traces. Sometimes all it takes is one overlooked silence, to bring an entire forgotten story back into view.